Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Rebecca Thistlethwaite. I'm the program manager with the Niche Meat Processor Assistance Network. We are a cooperative extension program that works across the nation to provide technical assistance and outreach to small and very small meat processors. We're excited today to have four really excellent panelists from around the country talking today about voluntary third-party certifications. So small meat plants serve a wide diversity of customers, and sometimes those customers ask for their plants to get third-party certified. What really does that entail? Could going through the process of third-party certification open up new customer segments for you? Do the costs outweigh the benefits? What kind of changes will your plant have to make in terms of animal handling, what kind of materials you use in the plant, your standard operating procedures, any equipment changes that might need to be made? These are the kind of questions that we're going to discuss today. So the first third-party certification we're going to analyze today is animal welfare approved. And it's not actually a certification, it's an audit or a review of your plant. And then the next one that we'll look at today is certified organic. So the order of speakers today will be Tim Holmes, Director of Compliance with Animal Welfare Approved. Next, we'll go to SEP Parvin out in South Carolina of Williamsburg Packing Plant, who has gone through an animal welfare approved audit for his plant. Then we'll be speaking with Aaron Zeis. You don't see his video, but you'll hear his voice, and he's in Oregon with Oregon Tilth, an organic certifier. And then we will be finishing with Tracy Smarciarz of Heritage Meats in Washington State, who has gone through organic certification for his meat plant. We'll save about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. We may go over the hour just a tiny bit, but I'm going to try to keep it as close as we can to an hour. So with that, we will start off with Tim. Tim, take it away.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and hopefully this works pretty good and share my screen here. Yep. Okay. So my name's Tim Holmes. I'm with the Animal Welfare Approved Program. We currently are a program of a greener world that currently operates three certification programs, Animal Welfare Approved. We have a certified grass-fed program and a certified non-GMO program. Once again, I'm Director of Compliance with the program, which basically just means I'm responsible for making sure all the farms get audited and all the plants get reviewed and everything runs along smoothly, hopefully. We have a website. It's animalwelfareapproved.us, and if you have questions you want to ask, you can go there and hit the info at A Greener World, and we also have a phone number that we can talk to you there with. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the program and the history of it. We're a program of A Greener World. We're a food and label for meat and dairy. We're a pasture-based outdoor program that was put in place so that consumers who were looking for high welfare eggs, meat, dairy have a program that they can trust to buy the products, and the farmers can use this label to market their products. We are an ISO certified organization, which basically means we're also audited, our procedures and policies. But our core mission at AWA is we certify farms and support farmers raising their animals to the highest welfare standards, outdoor, on pasture, or range. So we are a birth to slaughter program. So meat sold under our label, it must come from animals that have been certified as being raised to the animal welfare approved standards and slaughtered using a method that we have reviewed and signed off on. So basically it means that a farm can't be certified animal welfare approved unless the slaughtered animal has passed a review for that species also. So we have our slaughter review guidelines. We have two sets. We have one for red meat. We have another set for poultry. Of course, the red meat covers cattle, bison, hogs, sheep, and goats. The poultry is pretty much chickens, duck, geese, and turkey. The guidelines are based off of the American Meat Institute guidelines and input from the University of Bristol in the UK and from other experts in the field of slaughter. All of our slaughter guidelines are science-based, so they have science to back them up. So the next question we generally get asked is, well, okay, how does the AWA slaughter review process work? We are a farm-based program, so generally what happens is the farm interested in the certification would approach the plant about the possibility of allowing a slaughter review by the program in order that they could obtain their certification. We generally only review plants that have AWA farmers wanting to use them. As with all things, we have reviewed plants that don't currently have AWA farms attached to them, especially if they're in a region where we are looking to grow or there's a scarcity of plants. The program would typically review the species that the farmer is certifying. The plant may slaughter other species that we don't review, or if the plant wants all the eligible species they slaughter review, we would try to accommodate the plant in that request. If the plant agrees to a review, then we'd contact the plant to set up a date and to answer any questions they'd have. If after the farmer talking to them, maybe the plant's not ready to commit to doing a review at that point, but they're willing to talk with us, then we would basically contact them and answer any questions they have about the process and the guidelines at that point. We've got some common questions here that we get asked. One of them is, what does an AWA review cost the plant? And we are a free program, so there's no charge to the plant or the farm, and this is part of our independent third party. We don't have a stake in whether the plant or the farm gets passes the review or gets. So the next big question is, who has access to this review? So the review is confidential between the plant and the program. We don't share any information from the review without written permission from the plant. So even though the farm may have initiated the review, the only thing the farmer would know was whether or not the plant passed the review and were eligible to slaughter that species for the program. We wouldn't share any of the review itself or any of the items in it unless the plant requested that we do so. So we get the question, the next one is, why do you review plants but certify farms? And the basic reason for this is that the program may only review some of the species that a plant slaughters, and the review of specifics to animal slaughter for farms in the AWA program. This kind of follows into the AWA program requires all species to be stunned before slaughter. Say your plant performs ritual slaughter for some species, does this disqualify the plant from being reviewed by the program? And the answer to that is the program guidelines don't supersede state and federal law. However, animals that are not stunned before slaughter are not eligible to be reviewed by the program. So if you weren't willing to stun, we wouldn't review. That being said, if the plant is willing to stun the species being slaughtered from an AWA farm, then the program would review the plant for that species, and it would not stop the plant from slaughtering non-AWA animals using ritual slaughter. So why should I consider allowing a third-party audit to review my plant? And it's basically the AWA review process can save you money from a plant standpoint. Our AWA slaughter specialists all have backgrounds in the meat industry. So when we do a review, you won't get anybody that doesn't have a solid plant or even some of them are former plant inspectors. We have some former plant operators. So the person coming to your plant is not going to be somebody who's not qualified to do the review. We've reviewed hundreds of plants since the program started back in 2006. We currently have over 160 active plants in the program, and we're adding more monthly. So I think we're probably one of the programs that's probably worked with one of the programs that's probably worked with a lot of small plants all throughout the U.S. and Canada, because we do audit farms and review plants in the U.S. and Canada. And we've observed countless common sense solutions to improve animal welfare and handling. The reviews show existing and potential customers that the plant's committed to animal welfare. We do also offer some unique training opportunities. We've been bringing the people over from Bristol University who operate animal welfare officer and poultry welfare officer courses in the UK and the European Union, and every plant that operates in there has to have somebody at their plant that's took this course. We've actually brought them over to the US and have put on that course now. I think we've done it in 2013, 2016, and 2017. And that's open to plants in the program, and we try to keep the cost of that to a minimal to the plant. So we've been helping pick up some of that. the training is very specific to animal welfare and connects to how and why of the handling and slaughter methods. So that's it's kind of unique. We've had participants from plants and other agencies, and they've all been very pleased with it. And it is a little bit different than you'll find with other trainings currently available. So the next big question we get is my plant's already USDA or state inspected? Why do I need somebody else looking around? And most of the general public have no knowledge of USDA or state programs regarding animal welfare. The USDA has done a good job here lately of progressing towards higher welfare handling and slaughter, but most of their stuff is more centered around foodborne illness outbreaks and complying with basic food regulation rather than maximizing animal welfare and improving meat quality. The animal welfare approved review focuses specifically on animal welfare and slaughter. So in other words, our review starts when that animal steps off the truck. It actually starts on the farm, which doesn't have anything to do with the plant, but once it gets to the plant, it starts when that animal steps off of the truck or trailer into the plant, follows the animal through the handling system to the point of knock, and then at the point of slaughter. And then once the animal is slaughtered, our review stops. We don't go into the meat safety stuff and all the hygiene and that kind of stuff, because once the animal is slaughtered, death is not a welfare issue if done properly, so we stop at that point. The AWA program, we also have guidelines that exceed the USDA requirements, such as stun to stick time, more specifics on that, hot prod usage. We're more strict on that. And so this basically means that if your plant is meeting our slaughter guidelines, then you should have no issue complying with USDA requirements. And then finally, displaying the trusted AWA credential clearly communicates the plant's commitment to high welfare handling and slaughter. So we go back to the other thing about, well, what's in it for my plant? Because it's clear with our program what's in it for the farm. They get to use our seal. They get to use that to market to consumers. What does the plant get? Well, animal welfare at slaughter directly affects product quality as well as the consumer perception of the end product. If you've had an animal that's been stressed and run through, you're going to get pale soft pork, you're going to get spotting, you're going to get all kind of things that affect the quality of that product, which is going to affect the amount of money your plant's making. There's just tons of studies showing that unnecessary stress before slaughter will adversely affect meat quality. The program's independent third-party review can provide valuable insight on animal movement and identify possible causes and effect of animal welfare on meat quality. And once again, the slaughter plant specialists, because we only review plants, we don't audit them, they can offer practical solutions to cut down on animal stress and unloading, holding, movement, and stunning to help maintain meat quality. This allows the animals to move easier through the plant, saves time and money, which can increase capacity, can lead to better working conditions, which cuts employee turnover, which leads to increased quality of the product, which attracts us more business, which that all makes you money. So that's why animal welfare and handling are very important. So what's an actual review like? It's really, if you're used to being USDA inspected and the other, you're not going to have any problem with our review. I know that surprises a lot of people, but if you go look at our standards on the web, and I do encourage you to do that, you'll see that you'll look at them, and most of the stuff you're probably doing already. So for a well-run plant, the review will just confirm that you're using best practice handling, stunning, and slaughter is taking place. The review, basically, when they get there, they go through your holding pens, your alleyway, stun box, stunning procedures, your processes. It doesn't really generally take that long. You're looking at a couple of hours, depending on the number of animals we're going to see slaughtered. We do deal with a lot of small plants, and we do have some bigger plants, so it can vary. We can be at a plant and only be able to watch 2 or 3 cattle killed, or we could be there and see 15 or 20 or 40 go through. So it just depends on how much we're watching, and then also the number of species. We do have a lot of multi-kill species plants in the program, and if they're doing it on the same day, then which is unusual, but if they were, it could take a little bit longer. But generally, a couple hours per species would handle that end of it. And of course, the review ends with a short meeting to discuss the findings afterwards and to go over any corrective actions necessary for the plant to be able to pass the review. And I think this is important to understand too. If a plant doesn't meet all of our guidelines, that doesn't mean they can't come into the program. It just means we'll work with them on a corrective action to get that fixed. And so long as it's acceptable to the program, we can go ahead and work with that. So the other question is, well, okay, this all sounds great. It sounds like I might can get more business because your program's growing, or these welfare certifications are in demand. It could lead to extra business. But what's it going to actually cost me to get my plan up to the point where it could pass your review? And this is where it's really interesting, because we've been doing this now for about 11 years. And most of the corrective actions necessary to meet our guidelines are really simple ones that don't require massive reinvestment or major changes to a plant. Now, there are exceptions to that, but most of them, it could be, you could have an issue with bulking, and it could be as simple as changing the lighting in the plant, which, can be costly, but it also can be just using different wattages and stuff like that, or placing temporary lights in different areas. So it doesn't have to be expensive. Elimination of shadows or other visual distractions. We've literally had plants put up shower curtains to see if it would work. And if it works and they want to do something more permanent, then they can. But if they like the shower curtain and it's working, we don't have a problem with that either. We don't. We just want to know that it works. So, and then you get into stuff like repairs of surfaces to eliminate contrast or slippage. So sometimes, a plant may need to groove if they've never had their concrete grooved, or re-groove it. Or it may be as simple as putting some dairy lime down, so you don't have to do that in all cases. It can be a pretty cheap fix. So like I said, our only concern is whatever corrective action chosen, that it works. And like I was saying before, we are a confidential program. We don't take pictures at plants without permission. We don't share anything without permission. When we do have a corrective action and a plant sends in a picture of the correction action, we don't share it outside. So that's why I don't have any pictures available of any of this. We do have this kind of stuff, but we just don't share it without a plant's permission to do so. But most of the time, it's just really simple stuff. So the cost of being in our program really isn't high at all, and the benefits can be pretty great, because we work with a lot of small plants all over the country, and we have increased the business at a lot of these plants dramatically, to the point that they were losing their traditional markets, which was supplying mom and pop grocery stores and things like that, which have just basically disappeared. So a lot of these plants, without the farmers doing this direct marketing, they just wouldn't be economically viable. So in some cases, by having us review them and allowing farms that are in our program to come in there, it's really been a boon to their economic bottom line. So basically, we encourage plant owners interested in the program to contact us and chat about the guidelines and what's involved in the review. And basically, if you're looking at our guidelines and you see something there and say, well, I don't know if I can meet that or not, or like I was talking about stun to stick times earlier, there is some room in there, because we do have those, but a lot of that depends on if it's a killing method or if it's a stunning method. So if something's, with USDA, they basically say, so long as it doesn't regain consciousness, you're okay. With our standard, we've got certain bleed times if it's a stunning method, and then if it's a killing method, then we're not as concerned about bleed times, because once it's dead, it's really not important. So there's some things. So if you have questions about standards or guidelines, and you don't know if you would meet them, or if you're thinking, well, maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't, give us a call. We've got a toll-free number also I put in here, and we're more than happy to talk with you. Any conversation we have with you will be confidential. As I said, we don't share information outside of the program without your permission. So please go and look at our guidelines and policies. You'll find on our website, if you compare it to a lot of other organizations, that we are very transparent. We have detailed information about how we operate, what our policies and procedures are. So it's pretty much open, and you can get everything. And I would encourage you, if you do go to the website, we've got a Sustainable Farming magazine that we just started publishing not too long. We used to do newsletters before that, but issue 2, volume 2 has an article I think you would find interesting, and it's called Slaughter Plants Needed. So it kind of talks about in a little more detail some of the issues with getting plants in the program, and then the things we can do to help and that kind of thing. So I would encourage you to go and look at that. And basically, I'd just like to thank NPAM and Rebecca for this opportunity to talk with everybody. And we look forward to working with you in the future. If you're interested in having us review you, we would certainly be interested in doing that. So I don't know if I went over my time or not, but I've enjoyed talking to everybody, and that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Tim. You stuck to your time exactly. So why don't we move on to SEP Parvin in South Carolina, who's going to share more about his experience going through an AWA review.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good morning, everyone. We were inspected by a certified humane prior to AWA, and it was due to a customer's request. So when Certified Humane and AWA had reciprocity agreements years ago, and then AWA conducted the inspections and just shared the information with Certified Humane. Again, we have done it at customers' request. It was not a big change for us, but it definitely takes a commitment from everyone at the plant. I had to fire a couple guys for not following procedures when we initially started. But the animals, it's a lot easier to move the animals. It makes your experience with the USDA much easier if they know that you're inspected by animal welfare approved and you're trying to meet those standards in addition to the USDA standards. Because as Tim said, the animal welfare standards take a further step than the USDA requirements. It's worked out very well for us. We've gained some customers. We've picked up customers. Our existing customer base is happy that their animals are continuously being treated well up until time for them to leave this world. And I can't say enough good things about it. If you comply with the AWA guidelines, you're going to have a much easier time with the USDA inspection because you're complying with all the USDA requirements to meet the AWA requirements. So they're kind of hand in hand. It's just a step further. A lot of my friends who have small plants told me I was crazy when we started doing it. Now a lot of them are looking at it because their business has declined because they won't offer that option for their customers. So they're starting to think maybe I wasn't quite so crazy. So there's a little redeeming factor in there. That's really about all I have, Rebecca, unless there's something else you want me to try to address.
Sorry, have to unmute. Did you have to make any changes, SEP, in your holding pens or your stunning equipment or anything like that?
We put in a CO2 stunning system from Butina in 2003 or 4. And we did that because we were having the USDA district office in the Carolinas took a guideline in the old meat regulations book that said animals should be bled within 30 seconds of stunning, and they were interpreting that as the animal as a must and not a should. And with the electrical shock and then sticking the animals, best case scenario, we were at 23 seconds. Well, when you induce a grand mal seizure on an animal, it doesn't take long to whittle away 3 or 4 seconds. So we made the decision at that time to put in a CO2 stunning system. And so we use it for swine, poultry, and lamb. However, we cannot use it for AWA lamb because in their studies in the UK, there were some problems with the animals getting the CO2 because of the wool. So if it's an AWA animal, we have to shoot it. If it's not an AWA animal, then we use the CO2 chain. Cost was minimal. We did a little floor work on our pens, scabbarded them and put some anti-slip surfaces on. But again, those are things that we would have had to do with the USDA anyway. The CO2 stunning is much easier with swine because if you've ever tried to make one pig go somewhere by himself, they don't want to go. So with the CO2, we can move 2 or 3 animals at a time into the stunner, and they just walk down the aisle, walk right in, and we close the door and the elevator and lower them into the pit. So it's made our animal handling much safer. It's made it a lot safer for the operators because they're not trying to grab an animal that's having a seizure. So I really associate little to no cost with it. The benefits have outweighed the small cost that we put out.
Have you or any of your staff gone through the Bristol training, and
Yes.
Was that beneficial for your staff?
Yes, AWA had that in Charlotte, I believe, about 3 years ago. And I went through the animal welfare and the poultry welfare training. Now, I did not get recertified last year. I just could not make it to the meeting logistically. But there was a lot of good information in that that is good for the processor and the farmer about, how long does it, I never knew it took a cow 7 days to acclimate to a new environment until I went to that Bristol training. pigs, you know, if they find somewhere to lie down and something to drink and something to eat, they're pretty happy pretty quickly. Cows are the other end of the spectrum. So.
And one last question, and we'll probably have questions from the audience for you at the end. But having the AWA review, has it reduced your exposure to humane handling violations? Has it helped your plant avoid getting NRs, do you think?
Yeah, yes, it has. And we've kind of went a step further after the AWA, and we're trying to satisfy the USDA that we have a robust animal handling program. The big difference in that is if something strange happens, and it's a one-time deal, with the USDA, it's a non-compliance instead of the district office shutting you down, waiting for corrective action before you can start back up. So if you can demonstrate that you are actively involved and concerned with the handling of these animals prior to slaughter and during slaughter, then it gets you a lot of credibility with the USDA.
And does that AWA review or the paperwork for that kind of count as a robust plan, or is that happening?
They will, yes. When we've had our USDA calls them FSAs, food safety assessments, and in those they will want to review the audit forms that AWA leaves. So they also want to see the letter that your plant was approved as meeting the AWA standards. And I keep all that stuff in a notebook, so it's very short, simple, and sweet. And we've been involved in the program a number of years now, so I think all of the inspectors who come in here or even come in for review know that we're part of that program. That's one of the first things.
Great. Well, I'm sure we'll have more questions for you at the end. Thank you, SEP.
Yes, ma'am.
Next, we're going to go on to Aaron Zeis of Oregon Tilth. He's an organic certifier there, and he's going to share what the process of organic certification looks like for a processor.
Good morning, everybody. Get my screen set up here. There we go. Well, as Rebecca said, my name is Aaron Zeis. I'm a senior certification officer with Oregon Tilth. I've been doing organic certification for about 15 years. I began in Indiana. I had a small produce farm there. It was actually OFA certified, so it's nice to see OFA here today. And I also began conducting inspections there. I think I actually did this old farm's first organic inspection about 10 years ago. So good morning, Kendra. So we're based in Oregon, but we certify across the country. We actually certify in 7 countries and 47, I think it's actually 48 states now, about 1,500 clients. Just to give you guys a brief overview on Oregon Tilth. I've got about 30,000 certified organic products. We're looking at just under 1 million acres of certified organic farmland, and kind of gives you an idea of our spread and kind of how we operate. We do primarily organic certification. We work with a few other standards. Textile standards and body care and that sort of thing. No other, say, animal welfare standards at this time. And here is a brief overview, kind of the National Organic Program and how it functions. So at top we have the USDA. They establish and enforce the organic standards. They accredit us certifiers so that we can perform the job of certification. And the certification agencies are third-party organizations. They can be non-for-profit, which Oregon Tilth is. They could be private. There's a number of state departments of agriculture that perform organic certification. So there's quite a few different types of legal entities that perform organic certification. And of course, then they oversee the certified organic operations, which are typically divided into 2 categories. We have farmers and ranchers, and then we have processors and handlers. And of course, at the end, we have the retailers and consumers. And 205-100 is the organic regulation that declares who needs to get certified. And the basic premise is that if you are going to market something as organic or 100% organic, it must be certified. The USDA has ownership of that word as far as marketing agricultural products. and any use of that would need to be certified. Now, there is a small farm exemption. So if you are producing less than $5,000, you would be able to produce and sell something as organic. But now that, let's say, for instance, that organic meat would not be allowed to go into, say, a certified organic, another certified organic product. You would be able to sell it on your own, say at farmers market or direct marketing, identified as organic, but not certified. And once you went over 5,000, you would need to become certified. Now, under that exemption, you would still need to follow all the organic rules, which would include the record keeping and a number of the requirements there. So that does make it a little bit tricky to make sure you're in line with all the requirements without actually having the oversight of a certifier. But most agencies, there's plenty of resources out there to help you in that process if needs be. This is kind of an overview of the handling and processing certification scope. Basically how we break it down. Some of this verbiage actually comes from the regulation. So in processing, these top items here are kind of what would fall into, say, the processing category. And then you have handling, would be typically a little bit different. Maybe it's repacking, maybe we are relabeling, or maybe just distribution or what have you. But these are the two basic categories that we would break processing certification into. And an overview of the certification process is here, and you would start with our application. Each organic certification agency is going to have an application. We have broken it up into about 10 different modules. For each operation, say a slaughter facility, probably 6 or so of those modules will apply. Each one of those forms is anywhere from 2 to 4 pages, and each one focusing on a separate area, be it sanitation or pest control or storage, and we'll go through a few of those areas in a moment. I want to take this point just to begin to highlight maybe some of the changes that someone might need to undergo in order to get certified organic. Now, what I have found in most of my inspections of meat processing facilities or slaughter facilities is that there really is not that many changes. Most of these facilities are very well regulated. They're maintaining a great amount of records. As far as contamination, their sanitation procedures are really not going to leave us with any concerns, say, of commingling with non-organic meat or what have you. It's a pretty straightforward situation. The basic changes that I have seen that these facilities would need to undergo would be around sanitation, maybe selecting a different material, or if something needs to be rinsed. Obviously, maybe looking at perhaps a different carcass wash, and we'll get into some of those items here in a little bit. And there might be also some changes along pest control. If there's, say, active fumigation or what have you, maybe some procedures to deal with that. You would still, say, be able to fumigate your facility, but say in that instance, you would need to remove the organic product, perform your standard equipment sanitation after that, and that sort of thing. So in the end, you would still be able to keep a lot of your original processes, but maybe a slight alteration just in order to comply with the organic regulations. So back to our overview here, we're submitting the application. We're going to take a look at that application when we get it, and make sure that everything complies with the organic regulations, that there aren't any major concerns, and then we will send out an inspector. The inspector is basically there to observe your operation, see that everything that you put in your application is actually what's happening on the ground. And then once we have that inspection, they will turn in their inspection report to us, and we will conduct a final review. That is a large part of my job, takes up most of my day there. And we're going to make sure that there's not any issues, anything that's in the file, perhaps the inspector didn't see. And from that point, we'll make a final determination. And there might need to be a few things that come in line, perhaps a sanitation change or something of that sort. What I see with processing and handling certifications, that they can typically always come into compliance, as opposed to, say, a farmer that sprayed something on their fields. Usually with processing and handling certification, it's going to be a matter of changes. And typically I don't see that as major infrastructure or facility changes, it's often just an input or a procedure. And then, yeah, I guess after that, if everything came into compliance, we would issue their certification. Typically, our process is about 90 to 120 days from the point of application. I would say that's fairly standard across most certifiers. Depending on the time of year, it might be a couple months more. If you are considering certification, obviously the sooner you can get your application to the certifier is the better. And here is, again, kind of more of a succinct overview of what's going to be in what we call the organic system plan. So it would look at your processes, your ingredients, what your actual products that you would like to market and sell as organic, your storage plan, your cleaning and sanitation plan, the prevention of commingling and contamination, pest management, and record-keeping plan. And I don't know if that's not exactly my words there, and lots of records. I might even try to dispel that myth a little bit. I would say for most of these processing and handling most of these slaughter facility certifications, I have not found the records to be that much more intense than what they're already keeping for any other regulatory oversight they're doing. So maybe a farmer might begin to feel that way, that it's lots of records, but I haven't really heard those issues from meat processors. And I'll give you a few kind of screenshots of what our forms look like, just to give you a good idea. Here is the facility information. We're going to look at basically where the actual facility is, look at a site plan and product flow. Here's an example of something here of where we've got a nice overview. It can be anything as detailed as this, but about half the time I see a hand-drawn map. So it's what suits your facility, what you're able to do, but just so that we have a general idea of what the facility looks like and the product flow. Here we have the product summary. We're going to look at kind of what products that you're producing, and a list of those, and a list of the ingredients. We look at product formulations, which is probably not going to be so pertinent here. And then we get into the water and sanitation practices, kind of listing of the materials used, how they're used, if they're rinsed. And I will dive into sanitation a little bit deeper here. So your sanitation plan must manage material residues and cross-contamination of conventional food residues so that food contact surfaces, storage, containers, and processing equipment and organic product will not be contaminated with sanitizer residues or conventional food residues. So typically for sanitation materials, for equipment sanitation, you would be allowed to use basically any sanitation material if it is rinsed. The one exception to that being quaternary ammonia compounds, or quats. Those materials are intended to have a residual effect. So Oregon Tilth would ask that there is a residue test performed, a low parts per million residue test, just to make sure that that is not present before the organic product is produced. But I would say that's kind of the holdout as far as most other sanitation materials. You would be allowed to use them as long as they're rinsed. And then I'll go through a few sanitation materials that would not need rinsed here in the coming slides. But your sanitation plans, of course, needs to list all the equipment and the sanitation procedures, the materials, concentration points. And it's also helpful to identify the critical control points, any points where contamination may occur, be it from sanitation materials or a residual conventional product. But again, what I found in meat processing facilities, that the latter is typically less of a concern. There's far more reason to eliminate food residue on your equipment just than organic. So here is a breakdown of the different areas of sanitation that we look at. We've covered the equipment sanitation. And again, it's approved material, then you don't need to rinse. If you've got a non-approved material, then there would be a potable rinse. Other procedures such as a purge or flush would be acceptable, given that we take a good look at that purge procedure and feel confident with it. Worker hand sanitation, not something we typically look at too much or too deep, but occasionally come across gloves and some non-approved materials and that sort of thing. But again, same concept as equipment sanitation. Then there would be direct food contact sanitizers. In this scenario would be carcass wash materials. And We will go over a couple of those. I believe it's the next slide here. And then facility sanitation. So anything as the floors, drains, what have you, and typically those are not on our radar. We don't ask questions about those on our form. If it's not touching the organic product, it's not of a concern to us. Looks like we might be missing a couple letters on the slide here, but here are some direct contact approved materials. And yes, it would be the next slide. We'll get into Carcass wash materials, but you know, some of these may not apply for your particular operation or be acceptable with FSIS, but we'll list out the materials here. We've got anything peracetic acid, chlorine materials, hydrogen peroxide, acidified sodium chlorite, ozone, calcium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide, and sodium hydroxide. So all of those materials would be allowed to be used on your equipment without rinse. And I guess, well, that's true, but really I was listing those for direct organic food contact. So they may directly contact the organic product as well as equipment without being rinsed. And we've covered equipment sanitation. And here are a few commonly used carcass wash materials that we see. Again, it would be up to you to work with FSIS, and make sure that everything that you're doing is acceptable with the agencies that are overseeing you. But something we commonly see would be peracetic acid, again, chlorine materials, hydrogen peroxide, citric acid, lactic acid, and one that we see rare on occasion would be organic vinegar. And by using that, you would still be allowed to identify the meat as 100% organic. If you use any of the other materials, carcass wash materials, of course they're acceptable, but it would lose its 100% organic status. Here's an example of our receiving and shipping forms, packaging. There's really not much regulation that goes around packaging. Typically, we want to see that it's food grade. It needs to be free of prohibited substances. Occasionally, you have packaging that has antimicrobial inputs in it, and that would be something we would watch out for, but not something that we see very commonly. Here is our pest management form, first page. And pest management, I guess I will stop there for a moment and just say, again, typically what we find is that producers are going to not really need to do that many changes. If it is, they are going to probably, it's a matter of staging their changes or staging their pest control, making sure organic product is out. Here's our record keeping practices, gives you an idea of what we would basically be looking for. As far as records, we're going to look at receiving, processing, sales. Again, I would imagine as any good business that's regulated as well as this industry, the meat industry, is that most of these records you're already keeping for a variety of reasons. I know we're about out of time. I've got about 15 seconds here to cover these last couple items, and I'll briefly go over it. I don't think a lot of this is going to apply for the average meat processor. This gets a little bit into label categories and labeling, but basically there's a few different categories. We've got the 100% organic, what we'd call organic, which is 95% plus, and then there's the made with organic, which is 70% or greater. And if we've got any questions about any of these, feel free to follow up with me. This gets in a little bit to what what you can label or what you can state on organic versus 100% organic. Here is a sample label of some of the required things that, well, now the USDA seal would be optional. Ingredient statements are typically required. On some meat labels, it's not necessary for us per se. And one other thing that's required on a label would be to identify the certifier directly below where the facility is named. Here's a couple resources. The USDA website is a great spot to stop at. You can obviously find the organic regulations and fact sheets that are pretty helpful. And we've really been working over our website to provide a lot of great resources. Again, Tilth is a nonprofit. Part of our mission is to help educate. So we really try to provide a lot of educational resources there. And if you've got any questions, here is my contact information. And I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Aaron. And again, to everyone watching this, you can pop your question down in the Q&A, and we will get to that after our last speaker. So next up is Tracy Smarciarz of Heritage Meats in Rochester, Washington. Tracy, would you like to share your experience getting your plant certified organic now?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Tracy with Heritage Meats. I'm also a certified organic slaughter operation under Puget Sound Processing, as well as an AWA certified officer for humane handling, which I went through the class in 2016 down in Dallas.
Tracy, let me hop in real quick. Aaron, if you want to stop sharing your screen, I just want to make sure you knew that you hadn't stopped sharing yet.
Sure. Yeah, I'm having a little difficulty. My Zoom window kind of disappeared.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know that can happen. Let me see. Actually,
there we go.
You got
Is that better?
Let's see. Well, it's
Still showing?
Well, no, it's dark now. Let me see. Share my screen. What happens if I stop share? All righty, I think we're good now.
All right.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. I've been under organic inspection with the Washington State Department of Agriculture since 2009. The actual physical or part of the going under inspection was fairly minimal, like was just earlier discussed with Aaron. What's been some of the difficult parts about it is actually having the inspectors that come into our facility understanding the USDA regulations for meat processing, because we're I think the only organic processor, or one of two in the state of Washington. Also, our organic program is really only basically as good as our growers. We excel % of the processing that we do. If I was to say I would do this again, I would say no. I would not be an organic meat processor at this time. It has not been beneficial to my company whatsoever. Spent a tremendous amount of time educating the processors or the growers on what it takes to actually process and sell meat. And with all the additional time I put into the organic program with the inspections that they provide, the service, it has not been beneficial to my company whatsoever to be an organic meat processor. I've essentially stayed with it for the few customers that I do have, is more service I'm providing to them, even though it has not been a extremely positive experience. Another role that I see when I do have an organic inspection would be when the inspectors come into the plant. Their role is more as a regulator, is more of an enforcement in the gotcha mentality, which has been very frustrating over the years. I have found working with USDA meat inspectors to be far more helpful and supportive as a processor. I'm generally, the inspectors come in and feel as if they have that I found something that you have done incorrectly, and now this is going to cost you. And we're going to, and it's a financial cost because they're going to bring in additional inspection. And it could be over the minimal as a, the last one I had was actually at the display line and the ingredients line on a label. And I've spent months going back and forth over discussing a USDA approved organic label with one inspector who specifically doesn't understand the difference between this display line and an ingredient lines over products. So it's been quite a frustrating operation. I can't say that I'd ever do it again. As well as the fact that there's simply not enough customers in my area, and I cover customers over 2 states to actually support it. Again, with the 1% of my sales program, it's not worth it. I've explained to them and expressed to them that during my next inspection, which usually takes about 6 hours, that I may have to charge my customers for my time for that inspection, because it's 6 hours of inspection that I could be doing something else with. I wish I had a more positive experience with the organic program. But again, this is just the truth, and I'm trying to be honest with folks that the organic program has not been a positive experience for my company whatsoever. That's really about all I have to add on that. If I would be more than happy to answer any questions regarding it.
Do you process like 1 day a week organic, or how do you fit that into your schedule?
We might do it once every 3 months. We just don't have the volume to produce the product to stay with it. I have one customer that has indicated that they're going to do X and they do Y. So generally we're, again, about once every 3 months we'll process some beef or some pork or some lamb. Other than that, it's a one-off here, one-off there. When we do process, it's not at all difficult. We'll do it at the beginning of the day, and we keep the animals segregated. We'll use in our intervention steps for E. coli, we use the organic white vinegar by Spectrum. That none of that has been the difficult part. It's really been the actual customer base, and then the actual inspection that I've received from my certifier. It's been a very frustrating 9 years or 8 years, excuse me.
Do you think part of that issue with your inspectors is because it's through WSCA and it's a regulatory body versus being maybe like a nonprofit like Tilth?
Yeah, I've looked at actually, switching certifiers, and the cost to do that were so astronomical that when I brought it up to my customer base, they just said, well, we just can't really afford that. So I've gone back and forth on it. I would love to switch to Tilth, for example, as compared to what the WSDA. And I'm not the only one that feels this way. I have a lot of a few of the growers that I work with have been extremely frustrated with the inspection service being provided by the WSDA organic program.
And Tracy, have you ever applied for the organic cost share that reimburses you, like, I think up to $750 for your cost of the inspection?
Yeah, we've received it. The inspection now is fairly minimal. It's not that much of a cost right now. The one thing I will say with the Washington State Department of Agriculture is it's not that expensive to be part of the program once you get into it. It's just that if you have an issue, and for instance, this last one being this labeling misunderstanding, a lot of times the response is, well, we'll have to come out and do an additional inspection, and then that's where it gets expensive, and that's where it's quite frustrating with the fact that I have a USDA approved label, and then the WSDA organic program says, well, we can't approve that. And you have to. So it's very frustrating.
Do you think you could pick up more organic business if you advertised it? I mean, do you make it really obvious that this is a service you provide, or is it more just?
No, I don't believe so. I don't believe there is enough organic producers in my area that want to participate in the program. There were more, and they dropped out of it because of the costs associated with it on their end. The farmers have a higher cost to become an organic producer, and therefore their operating costs are so high that the products that they're trying to sell become very expensive, and that marketplace in the share is pretty minimal. What I've seen a lot of folks go to is word of mouth marketing and just relationships. It's really boiled down to a lot of great relationships, and that's why some of the former organic growers just got out of it.
And what was I going to ask you? Now I can't remember. Well, we have 10 minutes actually to go to Q&A for all of our presenters. So why don't folks in the audience pop your questions into Q&A. One of the first questions that we did get from Leonard Polara in chat, he was asking regarding animal welfare approved. He wrote, if an inspection fails, so I guess he's referring to a review, what is the process from there? Tim, maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, we have a process, and our plant review is different than our farm process. With the farm process, we have a CAP process that we do. We go back in, we review the audit, we send out a corrective action plan when we send it in if there's issues. With the plant reviews, we actually try to do those on site. So at the end of the review, we would sit down with the plant management or owner or whoever the representative was that we went through the plant with, and we would try to work out a corrective action plan at that time. If that's not possible, or we find other issues, we would basically communicate back and forth, and we may get them to send us a picture of what they've done if it's something we have to follow up on. So in cases where we can fix it on site or shortly thereafter, we try to do the corrective action plan. In some cases, the plant may decide, okay, well, this is not going to work out for me, or I don't necessarily want to do this at this time. So in those cases, we just basically part ways on good terms. And if they wish to come back and try again at a later date, we're more than open to do that. So our goal is to work with plants. We're not there to try to punish anybody or anything like that. We're trying to bring everybody up to a standard, and the goal is to work with as many plants as we can. So basically, if a plant was to fail a review, we don't share that either, and it would be up to the plant if they wanted to go forward with it at that point. We wouldn't push them or anything like that. So it would be their choice at that point if they wanted to do the corrective action, and if not, that's okay. But if they do, we'd definitely work with them. And if they contact, we've had the situation where maybe a plant didn't want to do something at that particular time, but then maybe a year later they get there's market pressure, or they've got this opportunity to add to their business a lot, and they say, okay, well, yeah, now it's worth it. So we're more than open to go back in and work with that plant at that point. I don't know if that.
Yeah, I think you did a good job there. Also, Tim, CO2 versus nitrogen stunning for poultry.
Yeah, there's some different issues there. Basically, with our poultry process, we do require with poultry we require 2-stage. So they go into if you're using CO2, they go into a 30% or less for at least a minute or two, and then you drop them on down into an 80+% concentration. So that's one of our standards. It's a little different than, say, maybe what USDA requires or somebody else. The main issue with nitrogen is a lot of it's just availability and the way you detect it. And I don't really know of any plant that's using nitrogen right now. Most of them are using CO2. I mean, there's argons, but there's just cost things with all these other ones. Right now, I'd say most of your plants are using the CO2, and with poultry, they're not quite as adverse to it as say with pigs, because pigs pretty much are going to react to it right away. So you just go ahead and immerse them in. But yeah, nitrogen's an option, but it's just not one that's well. The air is mainly made of nitrogen also. So there's the thing about how do you with CO2 you can flush it in and out pretty economically. So there's just most of your plants are going to be using CO2 at this time.
I have a question for Aaron. Is Chickside organically approved carcass wash?
Yeah, I saw that come up on the chat, and we're actually looking into that right now. See if we've got that in our system here. Hopefully, I'll have that here in just a second. I do believe that we have approved it in past. Does anyone know what actually raw material that is by chance?
SEP? No.
If anything, certainly I can follow up with somebody about that one. There's just such a variety of these materials, especially when it comes to name brands. But yeah. Hopefully I have an answer here just in a moment.
And Aaron, along those lines, you said something that kind of confused me. So there's only one organically approved carcass wash if you want to call your product 100% organic, and that is organic vinegar. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. At least that's the only one that I have come across. There's a variety of materials that would be acceptable as far as organic goes, but the efficacy and as far as fitting in with other regulations, that's that would be the part that I wouldn't know. But again, there'd be a variety of them that you could use, but obviously fulfilling the purpose of a carcass wash would be the next one. So for instance, this Chickside could be let's just say it's a name for a chlorine material or something like that. So there could be, a variety of these inputs that would be allowed. But again, I guess to your question, Organic vinegar is the only one that I'm aware of that would allow you to retain that 100% organic status.
Tracy?
It's the only one I have found as well, would be the white vinegar. At one time we were using apple cider vinegar, but that's actually not allowed, what's certified organic apple cider vinegar, but that's not allowed by the USDA as an intervention step. It has to be white vinegar.
Yeah, so they have to comply with both organic and obviously USDA standards. Yeah. In Q&A, Jolene asked, what does the certification process look like in states that have implemented food freedom policy like Wyoming? I don't really know how to answer that one. That doesn't really apply to AWA or organic certified. Another person asked, is it okay to use a Zephyr stun gun for stunning poultry for organic certification as opposed to electric? Well, organic doesn't cover stunning, but AWA, Tim, can you use that?
Yes, we work with we work closely with Bach Industries, the developer of the Zephyr was initially developed over in I think the UK, and then the University of Guelph done a lot of work with it, and then Bach Industries out of Pennsylvania actually manufactures that and the TED, and we work with them closely and actually have an agreement with them where AWA farmers get a discount on their products. But yeah, the Zephyr is approved for stunning poultry for the AWA program.
Tracy, I have a question for you. Have you ever tried to do a multi-ingredient product and have it approved organic? So say a sausage that has spices in it?
Yeah.
Could you walk us through that process?
Yeah, I do. I think 6 different flavors of organic sausages, pork sausages and lamb sausages. What I did was, you can purchase your organic seasonings from Oregon Spice, for instance, that has a certified organic spice program. You're going to be required to have a letter of guarantee, and as well as, depending on how your HACCP plan is written, either yearly or continuing, a continuing letter of that. You're going to need to have the records showing that the organic spices are organic, so you're going to have to keep that on file. I've also purchased product that was certified organic in the pre-blended seasonings as well. And I worked with a company in the Midwest and brought that product in. I have to keep on file their organic certificate and keep it up to date. I then have to submit the labels to approval both to the Washington State Department of Agriculture as well as the USDA. I keep on file in the facility. I have a binder in which I have my organic program binder, where I'll have my USDA label approval documentation in the folders with each of my organic certificates per customer. So when I do have an inspection that comes in, the organic inspectors are going to verify that on a yearly basis.
Mm-hmm. So in general, it's
twice the work.
The same record keeping you'd have to do for any sausage product, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That letter of guarantee, you have to get your label approved. It's just pretty much the same, right?
Yeah, what is nice about the USDA actually is they have their generic label approval system where you can submit the information and go through the process, and then you get documentation back from the USDA. With my inspection program, I submit the application to the WSDA for the label approval, and I might get a random yes email back. I don't get any real hardcore documentation back. And so when an inspection comes in, based on the years I've been doing this, the WSDA actually doesn't have on file, when they do my inspection, any documentation that these labels have ever been approved. So every year I'm almost having to reapprove every label with them during my inspection. So on the yearly inspection with the WSDA, it's almost an 6 to 8 hour process, and it's a extremely painful experience every year. Well, granted, it is once a year. At the end of the day, I need to take a nap.
So just showing the email that they wrote yes is not acceptable documentation.
No, and not in any other world I've ever been in, but just with them, if I even get a response back from them.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I find very frustrating with the organic program that I'm with is that the response time for questions could be up to 4 to 6 months in a waiting period from them when we're under an investigation or questioning that I'm in right now. Who can remember what was going on 4 months ago? So that's been another frustrating thing in comparison to working with the USDA, where you get answers within days back. And so it's another frustrating part of having a third-party inspection program with the one I'm working with. It's very frustrating.
Hey, Aaron, I have a question for you. Could you, so it sounds like Tracy's had a frustrating process with WSCA. Is Oregon Tilth a little bit more responsive in working with their processors?
Thank you, Rebecca. I really appreciate the chance. I was hoping to speak to that. I think with each agency, as with any different business, whether it's certification or not, obviously you can have a variety of customer experiences. WSDA being a government entity by the state, we can take what you want for expectations there. What Oregon Tilth, what we really pride ourselves in above probably anything else is our customer service. We just went through an hour webinar just yesterday on improving our customer service. It's something we hold very high. We don't think people should have to wait 4 to 6 months for approval on something. Say if I get an organic label, that's something that I'm going to review and turn around in 5 days. It's something that we don't think that these processors are having to go through well, the producers are producing the product, the processors going through all their procedures, and then just to have to wait for 4 months at the end, it's just not acceptable to us. So it's something we take very seriously. We would never feel that you need to re-review all of your labels at inspection. That does not make sense to me. Of course, you would need to look at them, observe that you don't say have any new labels, but my typical experience with the meat processor inspection is not an 8-hour inspection. But again, this is for each entity is going to be a little different. Each one having their benefits. WSDA does have a great program. They have a great materials review program and a lot of great staff that have been there for a long time. I have great respect for. What we each kind of have our different priorities and focuses, and that's one thing, having worked for another certifier for another almost 8 years, one thing I really take pride with Oregon Tilth is our focus on the customer.
Great, thank you. And Aaron, you got an answer on Chickside. Is it organically approved?
As far as the approval, I would need to dig a little deeper. I was able to see what the basic components were, which was potassium hydroxide, let's see here, citric acid, and lactic acid, which would all be approved materials. I would need to double check to say there's not anything else, inactive ingredients, what have you. But if it was just those 3 materials, it would be allowed. Now, to the question we had earlier, it would not be acceptable for 100% organic, but you would be allowed to directly apply it to the carcass wash and retain the organic status.
And I got a great comment from one of our attendees who wrote, not all certification agencies are the same. If you're looking to get certified organic, remember to ask multiple certification agencies for their timelines, how they respond to requests, their pricing, etc. So obviously some states don't have a lot of options. In many places in the country, there may only be one certifier, but it's probably always a good idea to get a few different bids and check around.
I highly agree with that.
Unfortunately, Tracy, you've already selected one, and you're in a bit of a bind. But I'm really happy that you could talk to your experience. Same with you, SEP. And Tim and Aaron, thank you so much for being in this webinar. A recording of this webinar will be available on the NPAN YouTube channel by next Monday. And with that, I think we're going to close up shop and let our processors get back to work. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.